So we have this definition of what it is to harm someone or something, and it's that harming something makes it a worse whatever it is. So if you take a book and you harm it, right, if you tear the cover and a bunch of pages out, now it's a worse book. If you take a horse and break its leg, then now it's a worse horse. So presumably if you take a person and you harm it, that person, him or her, this person becomes worse off. So the question is, well, should we be in the business of making people worse off or just worse? Well, Socrates is going to conclude that no, we never should. We thought that we ought to harm our enemies, but it ends up that no, our actual goal was to make people better off, to make them more moral. We know that when we harm something, we make it worse, so if we harm a person, then we make that person a worse person. There might be some tricky terminology here, right, where we think if we harm something, we sort of make it worse off. There might be a couple of senses of good on the line here, right? Where it might be, if you harm a person, if I take pretend person Bob, if I harm Bob, well, Bob is worse off if I break his leg, right? But is he a worse person in terms of, the way that we say you're a good person, you're a bad person? Maybe, maybe not. We do think, according to Socrates, that good people are more moral, so making someone worse by harming them can make them less moral. Our goal should be to make even our enemies better people, more moral people, so they treat us better. That means we should only always benefit them, never harm them. So we should help even our enemies. Thrasymachus, as you might, thinks this is crazy. Thrasymachus is going to break in, as Socrates says that we should abandon this help and harm definition. We should only ever help people. Well, soldier man Thrasymachus breaks into the conversation. He thinks this is just crap. He hates this idea that we should, be giving our enemies hugs and love and instruction instead. And he hates the way Socrates conducts his discussions. He's really unhappy with it. So he's going to say to Socrates, and remember this is the character Socrates and not actual Socrates, but he still hates the way that even the character is conducting his discussions. He's going to say, all right, Socrates, come on. You're dangling us by a thread with these definitions. They're back and forth. Just tell us what you think. I want to know your view. Show us why you're so smart. Show us why you're any better. Well, Socrates, clever guy that he is going to turn the tables. He's going to say, well, Thrasymachus, if you're so smart to see through my clever plan, why don't you show us that your own view of what justice and virtue and morality are is better? Why don't you tell us all about yours, and then you can show us how much better you are than us? Well, Thrasymachus falls for it, and he starts to teach the others what he thinks he knows. Thrasymachus is going to say that justice and morality boils down to the advantage of the stronger. Well, what does this mean? He says, well, the rulers of a country, the people in government, are the stronger. They're in power. If you've got the power, you're stronger. And they get to define what is just, because they're the ones making the laws. And we know that if you live in a country, you need to follow its laws. Even Socrates agrees with this, but we saw this in the Crito last week. So if you follow the laws, then you're acting justly, and whoever's in power are going to set up the laws to their advantage, right? They want to keep themselves in power. They want to keep the government going. So if you follow the laws, then you're working toward the advantage of those who are in power. And if you break the laws, then you're probably not. Well, we know that it's unjust to break the law, and it's just to follow the law. So justice and morality, what's right to do, is acting toward the advantage of the stronger. Well, Socrates counters with a question. Can't governments make mistakes? And can't they create bad laws? This is the classic time to bring Hitler into the question, right? Of course, Socrates can't do this because he's 2,000 years too soon. We can, though. So what if you're in Nazi Germany? Should you still follow the law? If the government makes a bad law, right, it seems like if you follow that law, what you're actually doing is harming the stronger people. If they make a law that is not actually to their advantage, that makes the country worse off, and you follow it, then you're harming the stronger. Should we follow these bad laws? It seems like then we shouldn't. Well, Thrasymachus thinks he has a way out of this, even though he seems like you would have to claim you always need to follow the law. He's going to say, well, you're really only the stronger, quote-unquote, when you're not making mistakes. This is what he calls the precise sense. So as long as you're doing it all right, then you're strong. If you're in power but you're making mistakes, well, you're really not all that strong. You're actually kind of an idiot. And this is going to be really important as we go forward, because Thrasymachus is concerned not only for power, but also for expertise, for sort of being smart and doing things right. This is going to come back to bite him later on, because of course Socrates is going to get the upper hand toward the end of the dialogue, and we will see that in the next video.